terms. We're going to get more into the connectors later, but let's talk about terms. For this exercise, let's assume you want to retrieve all the cases in the database that address a social host liability for injuries caused by intoxicated guests. That's what you want to search. What this PowerPoint presentation does not add is location. We have to figure out, well, where did this accident take place? Why is that important?
There might be pertinent laws that only that are governing the location, I guess, maybe.
Exactly. If you're in DC and this incident took place in DC and you do a global search, when you get into Westlaw, it's going to say all states, all federal. If you do that, first and foremost, you're going to have probably hundreds of thousands of cases that pop up. But then, as you just said, they might not be pertinent to your location. The state of Alabama might have laws that's different than DC. Iowa might be totally different. So you want to make sure that you choose, and we're coming to that later, the field, the correct database, the correct state where these things happen. Now, sometimes when you're searching for a particular legal issue, that issue has not been decided in the location where you are. If you're in Alabama, I'm licensed in several different states. One of the states is Alabama. Alabama's a little slower. They may not have an issue that I'm looking for. So you could look to a neighboring state. Maybe I look at Georgia. Atlanta is big. So maybe I would look in Atlanta, and then when I'm making the argument to the Alabama court, I could say, Alabama hasn't decided this issue, but the sister state or the neighboring state has. So you always, when you're doing this search, you want to make sure you're in the correct location. All right, so let's assume you want to retrieve all the cases in a database that address a social host liability for injuries caused by intoxicated guests. There's no right or wrong way to construct a search. Just proceed using common sense. And sometimes you have to use creativity. Sometimes you have to think outside of the box. That's what makes a great researcher. Attorneys are always looking for great researchers. You're doing research and you say, hey, I found this case, and you find it fast. They love that. So host, intoxicated, and guest will be the key terms for this exercise. These are the three that we would be using. We could have chosen more terms, but it's wise to stick with the essential terms. Why do you think you should try to use as few words as possible?
The more words, the more information you'll find. So
exactly. And if you find more information, what does that mean?
If your search is too broad, then you're going to have, like you said earlier, 100,000 cases come back, and you can't work with that.
Well, what would be the downfall of having 100,000 cases opposed to 10?
Well, you don't want to have too few either, but the downfall of that is you can't properly research 100,000 cases.
Well, you can, but what will happen?
Well, I mean, it would take you months, I would think.
Exactly. So it's the time element.
Yeah.
Usually your attorney is always working with time constraints. Always. Nothing is just forever. You need to do something, and the sooner you can find a strong case, 2, 3 cases, the better, because the attorney still has to draft the argument. So the reason why you don't want to use too many search terms, it would pull up too many cases, which will boil down to spending too much time researching. Very good. All right, so the terms, we have host, intoxicated guest, we have hostess, we have drunk, we have alcohol, we have friend. Get into the habit of placing your keywords in a horizontal line in your mind, if not actually on paper. You could do it on paper just to get you into the flow of researching, but I guarantee you when you start doing this, your mind will just start working and say, okay, I'll use host or hostess. I use intoxicated, I use drunk, I use alcohol, I use whatever. You'll get much better at it and you won't have to take the time writing it out. Under each word, add any word that is a reasonable alternative. You can probably think of additional alternatives for the exercise, but right now, let's keep this simple. Alrighty. Westlaw has what's called a thesaurus. If you look right there, you would see the thesaurus. If you click on that hyperlink, it would give you some synonyms or antonyms, if you want to use that, that you can also use to help you with your search. If you can't think of another word for intoxicated, use the thesaurus. They'll give you some ideas. That's what it's there for. And you see intoxicated is right there, and then they have all these other words, alternatives, excessive drunkenness,